created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
And in this season of the most favorite or the most well known arias, what other than La Donna Immobile? Of course, I'm pretty sure you recognize it from the very first notes that we played as the opening of today's program. Because even if you don't know what it is said or what it is sung, of course you recognize the melody. In fact, I'm going to be sharing an anecdote around the melody of La Donna Mobile. But as you know, I like to start these episodes by sharing and giving you more content and context on the opera and the composer. Of course, we are talking about the opera Rigoletto. Rigoletto is one of the three most famous operas, part of the, if we could call it like that, the Tritico by Maestro Verdi. I'm referring to La Traviata, Il Trovatore, and Rigoletto itself. Of course, one of the most represented operas by Maestro Verdi, of course, very well behind La Traviata. La Traviata is by far the most represented by composer Maestro Giuseppe Verdi. And there are reasons for that. It's much easier to find a soprano that is able to sing Violetta than to find a tenor who is able to sing Il Duca di Mantova, the Duke's role, the tenor. I have already, if you have gone through our materials in Ko-fi, then you know that I recently pasted or created a post on the subject that Rigoletto demands more than one type of tenor. I have not posted for you what my thoughts are on what it was. They were the initial thoughts on the difficulty of singing Rigoletto and moreover the Il Duca di Mantova that will come later. But I wanted to first start with that after having shared that it is from the very well-known Maestro Verdi. You know that it isn't yet his later mature stage. It is more in the middle of his career. It is more at the because and that is why these three operas are so well known, because this is what starts his actual major success throughout the world for Maestro Verdi. It is La Traviata and Rigoletto mainly, Trovatore a little more behind, that opened the doors of success for Maestro Verdi. So we know it is a success, but there is very, very interesting material around the creation of Rigoletto, because we are about to talk, and let me start with that. It is known as Rigoletto, but it was first going to be called La Maledizione. If you are familiar with the libretto of Rigoletto, then you know that each of the acts actually ends with a very strong reference to La Maledizione. In the first act, after the kidnapping of Gilda, and that Rigoletto, when Rigoletto is left alone after having been played by the accomplices of Il Duca di Mantova, when he is left alone, and he yells, Alla maledizione, because he is referring, remember that at the very opening of the opera, where there is a maledizione actually taking place in the second act. Remember the duet between Gilda and Rigoletto himself, when Gilda is begging Rigoletto to not to, for the life of Il Duca di Mantova, despite what he has done. So they wrap up with that splendid duet, very, very, very splendid duet between the two of them, which, by the way, I think we must build a scene for the gold members and the electrifying bonuses materials, because I think that duet can be electrifying because of the amount of drama that it carries, but it definitely refers to La Maledizione again. And as you know, the third act, the final part of Rigoletto, is when he, with the dead body of Gilda in his hands, he again recognizes that La Maledizione that he had suffered in the first act actually just happened. That is why La Maledizione was going to be the name, but I am about to read something very interesting around it. The other thing, and it has to do if you have heard the program on ChatGPT and Maestro Verdi, where we mentioned a good number of times that Maestro Verdi had to face censorship. And it is in Rigoletto that he had to face the censorship once again, even though we are talking about a very well-known aria, very lovely aria, the aria of La donna è mobile, tan 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 tan, which may be very shallow content. We're going to detail that again also, but stopping in the face of the censorship, let me share with you from the book Verdi by Joseph Weschberg, and there is a picture of the book. Actually, if you go to the gallery in our place in Ko-fi, you will find a picture of the book, this book that I purchased in one of my travels to Canada and that I like very much. It's my reference book for Maestro Verdi. I'm going to be reading content on pages 77 to pages 79 because I think there is very valuable content here that I would like and that will give you more of the context of this name, La Maledizione, the censorship, and in a way Giuseppina Streponi. And so let me make a correction. The content starts on page 71. So in early 1850, Verdi had signed a contract with Teatro La Fenice for the delivery of an opera's aria. I'm skipping to the part of that refers to Rigoletto. He decided that he was going to do Victor Hugo's Le Roi s'amuse. Very important to mention, Rigoletto is based on a play by the great Victor Hugo. Le Roi s'amuse, the king has fun, amusing himself. He greatly admired the romantic dramatists because, he later explained, the great characters produce the great situations and the dramatic effect follows naturally. A brilliant analysis. Verdi also instinctively sensed the music flow in Hugo's poetic language. The directors of La Fenice and Piave, the librettist, had grave objections. Pay attention to this. They admitted that Hugo's play was dramatically sound, everything planned, planted, and executed. Nothing had to be explained that happened either before the curtain went up or during the interval. Nothing had to be assumed. The hunchback, court jester Triboulet, as the court of François le Premier, discovers that the courtier who hated him had kidnapped his daughters. He turns on them, calls out the names of some of great old families of France, and says, "Your mothers slept with their lackeys, you bastards." This line brought the Paris premiere to a sudden halt as the audience jumped up, protesting. There was a first-rate scandal and the play was banned. Referring that Victor Hugo's play had also been banned as well. Of course, in this small passage, you have already recognized that the fury of Triboulet, now known as Rigoletto, when his daughter has been kidnapped, you know that it refers to the Cortigiani vil razza danata, a very well-known aria by the baritone himself. Continuing on page 71 of the book, Verdi must have known that the Austrian censors in Venice would never permit a play about a king who was a lecher and a libertine. Because remember, the Duke is a libertine. Keep that information at hand. He was not surprised when the director of La Fenice informed him that the Austrian military governor had rejected the libretto. He directs me to communicate his profound regret, pay attention to this, that the poet Piave and the celebrated Maestro Verdi have not chosen some other field to display their talents than, again, pay more attention to this, than the revolting immorality and obscene triviality of the libretto. His Excellency has decided that the performance must be absolutely forbidden. This is how Rigoletto was forbidden. There was no way it was going to be accepted that Maestro Verdi could present Rigoletto. Also, Pay attention to this. The censor also objected to Verdi's title La Maledizione, the curse. Verdi remained in Busetto, wisely keeping away from the censors, while the poor La Fenice directors and Piave tried to straighten things out with them. Gradually, the French king was made into the Duke of Mantua, and the hunchback Triboletto became Rigoletto, and provided the title for this opera. So when they decided to go for Rigoletto, of course we have to admit that he's the one who suffers throughout the three acts. There is no Rigoletto, there is no play by Maestro Verdi without La Maledizione and without Il Duque de Mantua. And it is because of the censorship that neither La Maledizione, neither Il Duca, who was the French king, didn't do it to the final version of the opera. So going back to the book, because as you may notice, it is very interesting what is shared with us in this book. Ugo was so furious that his novel poetic drama had been demoted to a mere libretto that he tried to prevent a Paris production for 6 years. But at last he realized that Verdi once again had expressed the very atmosphere of his play and grew to admire the opera. That is also important information. Ugo agreed that Maestro Verdi had transformed his great play into a great result in Rigoletto. It is also known that this is Piave's best job for Verdi. Piave himself was a great womanizer. Many may have identified himself with the lecherous La Donna Immobile from the Duke of Mantua. Giuseppina Streponi called Piave the Gran Diavolo. It is very interesting that somehow maybe Piave reflected himself in the role of the Duke of Mantua. The big devil, Piave, and the big bear, Maestro Verdi, who worked together. It seems that during the rehearsals for Rigoletto, Verdi had been flirting with a Venetian lady who later wrote to him, Poste restante in Cremona, but somehow Giuseppina found out about it, and that was the end of it. She also knew that Piave once approached a woman friend he had known and sang to her La Donna Immobile. I am skipping to page 77. The conversation between Rigoletto and Sparafucile is not just a duet but a dramatic conspiracy. The melodies played in the orchestra and the two men discuss the terms of the murder in a sort of parlando. La Donna Immobile may be an old-fashioned aria and remains one of Verdi's most popular melodies, but it is also a perfect character sketch of the cynical seducer, the Duke. The cynical seducer, the Duke. But there is something, and this is very important because we are going to refer it now that we are about to jump into the analysis of the words and the melody of La Donna Immobile. Rigoletto is a masterpiece, and the audience at La Fenice on the evening of the 11th of March 1851 recognized it. Within 4 years, the opera was performed all over Europe and in America. Routine performances do not always convey its greatness. Look at this. The accompaniment must not be played in a hurdy-gurdy style. And double attention to this. The tenor should be intelligent and vocally excellent to convey the idea of the frivolous, licentious character of the Duke. And remember that Maestro Verdi paid much attention to how his characters should be. And let me go back. The tenor should be intelligent and vocally excellent to convey the idea of the frivolous, licentious character of the Duke. As Verdi said, look at this, performing with elegance and a sense of irony. I am going to go back to this because we have already learned what we needed to learn in regards to Rigoletto and moreover La Donna Immobile. And before I also forget, it is also said that Maestro Verdi kept the melody of La Donna Immobile till the very end. He didn't want everybody to hear it in the rehearsals because he knew it would be a great success. He knew what he had composed. He also admitted that it was not the best of his manufacture, but he knew it would be a great success. Of course, Maestro Verdi was right. La Donna e Mobile is by far one of his greatest successes. So we are in the third act, where the Duke is going to be singing La Donna e Mobile with this very great, well-known orchestration that you heard at the beginning of today's, and that people can try, if not to sing it, at least to hum it. Tra la 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 la, and they would be happy doing it. And we hear the Duke has looked for a place to stay overnight since he cannot arrive to his castle. It turns out to be Sparafucile's place, and remember that Rigoletto has already built or has already paid for the services of Sparafucile, who has been hired to actually kill the Duke. And the Duke, that is a role that is meant to be detested, turns out to be the role that people love. I'm not sure it has to do because of the lovely melodies that Maestro Verdi wrote for the role, or maybe because people are not really getting the essence of the Duke. The Duke is an evil guy, a guy of power, a man of intelligence, a man who seduces or rapes the women that he likes. He does everything in his power to get away with his desires. So in no way is he a character that we are going to love, but his melody, this a very sticky melody, and I want to share with you what the opening notes, or the notes on the score from Maestro Verdi just before the tenor starts singing, says, in allegretto, con brio. So the tenor has to sing with brio. Before I jump into the first part, I wanted to share, because I also mentioned it in the post, that the tenor voice for this role, and specific for this aria, is better for a light tenor. Why? Because heavier voices convey too much drama to this aria. And this aria is not meant to be dramatic. This aria is meant to be catchy, lovely, sticky, contagion us of the mood of the Duke, even though he's going to say horrible words, because we are going to see it. He's going to say horrible words. He's not to provoke that we detest him. But because when you have a heavy voice, this is not correctly conveyed. So spinto, and the very more often the spinto than the dramatic tenors go for this aria, they have to do a huge effort to try to put it lightly, because otherwise it will sound horrible. This is an aria that if it is not sung with charm, it ends up turning into a mess. Other thing that usually blows everything up is that the tenors want to sing it as if it was La Gelida Manina, a lyrical aria, where it is not. It is not a lyrical aria, and even though there are legato parts requested by Maestro Verdi, it is not going to be sung Che gelida manina, la donna è mobile. It is not like that. It has to do with brio. Remember that the Duke is having fun, so as he's having fun, he must do something like La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, mota d'accento e di pensiero. All this, and even I tried to exaggerate it a little, because the melody and these accents of the melody, and Maestro Verdi has been very intelligent in marking these accents, because that's going to be the easiest way for people to recognize the melody. So even if people don't know that you say La Donna è mobile, they know the melody of la 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 la. That's why Maestro Verdi knew it was going to be a great success. So what the words are in it, maybe nobody knows. But that the melody is very easy to remember, of course it is. And what has the tenor, or il Duca, told us, la donna è mobile qual piuma al vento. So the women, or it is said in singular, but in order to make it sense, we are going to put it into plural. So women change their minds so often as the feathers in the wind change their direction. So this is how it opens. So why do you care about the opinion of a woman when they change their minds so often as just the feathers in the wind? Then muta d'accento e di pensiero, which is a very horrible way to put things. So she changes her voice and she changes her mind. But muta d'accento, remember that traduttore, traditore, as Italians say, sometimes translations do not work very well. So when they say muta d'accento, she changes his words and she changes her thoughts. Sempre un amabile, leggiadro viso, impianto in riso e menzognero. And by this it says, oh, women, they are always sweet. They always have a pretty face. Sia that you find them in tears or in laughter, she is always lying. Women are always lying. So to not politically correct, at least not for nowadays, things are being said about women in the words of Il Duca di Mantova, a womanizer, and if not a hater of women, because he's a womanizer, at least he doesn't have them at a high level of recognition. So if women change their voice and their minds and their thoughts and change as feathers in the wind, but no matter how sweet, no matter how pretty, because either they are in tears or in laughter, they are always lying. And that melody that goes sempre un amabile, the Maestro Verdi also accentuated that phrase, which means that these things really matter. So we have barely touched two of the phrases of Maestro Verdi, and we have found how he has put the accents. And those accents, la donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, mota d'accento e di pensiero, sempre un amabile, leggiadro viso, in pianto in riso e menzognero. La donna è pay attention here, because now he adds a pause. It is not la donna è mobile, it is la donna è mobile with a pause, mobile, qual piuma al vento. And again we have a pause because before he says to, so it is not mobile and it is not vento, it is mobile and then it is vento. Mota d'accento e di pensier. And pay attention, because this is the first time Maestro Verdi asks the tenor to sing forte when he says la muta d'accento, with the emphasis in cento, that is where the forte goes, because this is not supposed to be a long sustained note, because if the tenors goes for excessive duration of the note, just again for fan service, just to prove he has the fiato, just to prove he has the voice, then the whole melody loses sense, because notice that every phrase, every syllable has been very short so far. La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, mota da... Notice how everything goes fast and the syllables keep moving. Sempre un amabile, leggiadro viso. Of course, I am doing it faster just to exemplify that you cannot say mota da excessively long, because it doesn't make sense. So it has to be treated. Mota d'accento e di pensier, e di... Pay attention to the e di because that triolet that Maestro Verdi wrote makes sense here. Eddie, Eddie, and that's another reason why it is better sung with a lighter voice, because lighter voices, provided that I'm going to say it, try to put it into simple words, the bandwidth of their voices is minor to the heavier voices of the spintos. So a spinto voice, you will not notice the triolet, but for a lighter voice, it is very clear what is done, because there is a note from Maestro Verdi there that says leggero. So it is not, again, going back, remember that the Duke is a light character. Sorry to insist, but it is much better performed for lighter voices, because he has to convey Mota d'accento di pensier, di pensier, di pensier. And then also notice that there are pauses. Di pensier. It is not di pensier. It is not continuous. So that is also, remember that the pauses, and if you refer if you have heard the master classes by Maria Callas, he explains that very well. When a composer, and moreover in Maestro Verdi, makes these pauses or these silences, they are conveying meaning. It is not putting silences because Maestro Verdi didn't know what to do there. He's adding silences because he wants to add, to emphasize, to convey a certain meaning. And just after he has said, di pensier, he's emphasizing pensier, because he has gone back to the phrase where he says that the women change their minds and their thoughts, muta d'accento e di pensier, and their thoughts. They change their words and their thoughts. If you would like to put it into English, that's exactly what it says. Muta d'accento, end of their words, end of their words. Dun, 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 that melody, of course, you also recognize. And then he insists, di pensier, di pensier, dun, 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 dun. And there is another, now there is a continuous in, it is an F, so it is not really a high note, but personally I like the way he raps this first time, or this first part of La Donna Mobile, because he goes for di pensier, tan 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 tan, and also it is written con forza, because remember that the previous time he said it was a triolet, di pensier, but after that he says di pensier. This time there is no pause, but there is a descending, because it comes from an F sharp descending for an E, then descends for a B, and then descends to a C, and then continues descending, and now goes for a B. So this is Maestro Verdi descending in the notes, but now notice that he has done it with a much stronger attention to the way he's wrapping up this first phrase. So by this time you have already heard it all about La Donna Mobile. There's really, except for the cadenza, that we will stop there in a second, there is really not anything that is going to be added. It is an simplistic aria. No more words than that, not many more changes in the melody, but pay attention. The challenge is in the interpretation. Do it very lyrical, and the role of the Duke doesn't make sense. And going back to the comment that I did earlier, remember that Maestro Verdi paid lots of attention to the note that the music and the singer had to be elegant. It is not going to be a vulgar interpretation. So even though the Duke is a libertine, a womanizer himself, a man who doesn't appreciate women, it doesn't mean that it has to be vulgar. And that is something that happens, unfortunately, very often recently, because now tenors, because they think it now looks funny, exaggerate or take little care for the syllables. And so the wrapping up of the final syllables or the phrases are either exaggerated, wrongly positioned, maybe too open, because, for instance, La donna è mobile, mobile, it is very clear, but it is often mobile, mobile, horribly wrapping the e only because the tenor doesn't care to pronounce correctly. But remember, he's a member of the aristocracy, he's a duke, so he has to speak, in this case sing, as an educated person. And an educated person wouldn't sing qual pioma al vento, with a horrible sound. He has to be elegant, not vulgar. Qual pioma al vento, muta d'accento e di pensiero. As I was telling you that Maestro Verdi is going to repeat the same melody, only if the words are going to change. And right after this part, when we go back to the aria, he says, è sempre misero chi a lei s'affida, chi le confida, mal cauto il cuore, ormai non sentasi felice a pieno, chi su quel seno non gli va amore. La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, mota d'accento e di pensier. What are the words now when he has said, è sempre misero chi da lei s'affida, always miserable the one who trusts her. So man, be careful, you shouldn't trust women. Always miserable the one who trusts in women. He who confides in her his own weary heart. So don't never trust a woman with your love and heart, because then yet one never feels full happy. You will never feel completely happy. Who on that bosom does not drink love? Chi su quel seno non gli va amore. La donna è mobile, again, qual piuma al vento, mota d'accento e di pensier, tan taran tan tan taran tan e di pensier. And then we are reaching the wrapping up of the aria, but just go back to just insist on what I had mentioned in the first part, that Maestro Verdi really accentuates the aria. È sempre misero chi a lei s'affida, chi le confida. With a shakatura or with another note on the score, he's always telling us that something has to be emphasized. Remember, it is not ormai non sentasi, it is ormai non sentasi felice a pieno. Of course, keep in mind that I am overdoing, exaggerating a little myself, only for you to notice what you should be also on your side noticing when you listen to the rendition of a given tenor. So if you notice that the tenor is a little too monotonous, it really means he really didn't understand the sense and the purpose of the aria. And if you notice that he's exaggerating many vowels to open, the carelessly wrapping up each of the phrases, then he's going for the other way, to vulgar. And the tenor, the duke, is neither too vulgar, neither too romantic. That's why Maestro Verdi said it needs a very smart singer. These things need to be conveyed smartly, not with over effect, And notice that Maestro Verdi not only does not all he only uses the forte one time, but he uses piano and pianissimo, double P, di pensier. So if your tenor of preference exaggerates and goes very high with it, di pensier, he's overdoing something that is not even written. So di pensier. And as we are approaching, because I also wrote it for the cadenza, you must, if you're familiar with the terminology music, then you know that a cadenza is a series of notes written by the composer with the purpose of allowing the tenor or the singer or the player, the musician, to show his talent, to demonstrate virtuosity, which, by the way, is a word that all musicians and singers like, that you're a virtuous performer. So in order to convey your virtuosity, there is usually a cadenza added to the aria, but there is in fact no cadenza required. So if you listen to a tenor just rapping on pensier, it's not that he's going against the score. It is the opposite. He's actually doing what the score is requesting. The score is requesting to wrap it up just like that. Keep an F for longer, for 4 times, then rise it to a B with con forza, but very shortly. It is not to be kept. It is not pensier. It is only for a short moment. Pensier. And that's how it is supposed to be wrapped up. But that is not the way we are used to listening to it. Because after the that's when the tenors go for the cadenza. And that's when things start getting, depending on the tenor, they may turn up very well, as it is in the case of Pavarotti, because Pavarotti has the right voice and has the right technique for having a nice, lovely cadenza. So he usually went for something like I try to do it slower so that you can identify how he liked to play with the notes. But he used to do it faster. But that's what I was saying, that the tenors usually mess up, because if they are unable to do it fast, they do it even slower than the example I provided, and then the cadenza loses all sense, and you're not sure if the tenor is running out of breath, if he's off pitch, or if he's having any other sort of trouble, because when they try to something like that, something that horrible, it really loses sense. And there's been recordings of very great tenors doing those horrible things. So my thoughts are that if you are not able to do something nice, something that you are comfortable with, just skip the cadenza. I mean, the cadenza is not written, so if you skip it, you are adhering to the score. But adding a cadenza that you cannot actually sing correctly, man, you should better skip it. So if you're a tenor, you're a friend of a tenor, or you have heard other versions of tenors suffering and in return making the public suffer for a horribly executed cadenza, better go for what is written. If you wrap it like that and you wrap it up lovely, at least you didn't do something that you might regret for later. Of course, I was saying at the beginning of it that Maestro Verdi, and my thoughts are that Maestro Verdi was aware, adding to that he liked to the role of Victor Hugo. Maestro Verdi was very not open. He wasn't very open in his criticism, and I think that what he actually, and part of the reason why he wanted to convey the message he wanted to convey in La Donna Immobile is that the Duke deserved to be killed. But also keep in mind that later we will learn, or Rigoletto will learn, that the Duke was not killed because he will listen in the distance to the tenor once again singing part of his La Donna Immobile. So he knows that the Duke is alive. He will listen to that in the distance, and that he will learn that La Maledizione was realized, and the frivolous libertine Duke is still alive.
You can follow our channel for the latest updates and more content. Opera We Love Singing, in just one word. Link in the description of the episode.